This is the Mentoring Moments Podcast with Jentezen Franklin and Marcus Meekum.
Well, welcome to Mentoring Moments. I'm Marcus Meekum. I'm here with Pastor Jentezen Franklin, and we're here again with Dr. Michele Fleming. For those of you who maybe didn't see the last episode, she's a licensed psychologist, consultant, executive coach. She primarily helps pastors, Christian business leaders, corporations, all kinds of leadership stuff. Phenomenal time we had, but we wanted to keep on going because we started talking after we stopped the recording, and we're like, maybe we need to deal with some of this. And so, Michele, welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Michele, welcome back again. And we want to deal with some stuff on raising children, parenting. We want to deal with that. Specifically, we also want to talk about the pressures pastors feel when it comes to the guilt that they feel because they can't be all the things that they're expected to be at any given moment. Mm-hmm. And I kind of gave the example of, in our church, for example, I have a staff of people. We have great leaders, great people. Many times they're more qualified than I would be to be in any given situation. They're actually better than they're who I would go to if I was in someone's shoes sometimes. And so you delegate, you try to, make sure that the right people are addressing the different needs, but you still end up falling short. You end up falling short because maybe the family was in the church for many years and they were always there, they were always serving, they were always sacrificing, and then they're in a situation that maybe they thought you should have been there and you couldn't be, or you couldn't be there consistently, or maybe you didn't know that you needed to be there in that way. Maybe you've received partial information, incomplete information, or maybe your mind was somewhere else when you got
you just weren't there.
The 100 text, or whatever. Maybe
couldn't bilocate.
Maybe we're doing what you were just saying we shouldn't be doing, which is isolating, sucking our thumb in some corner somewhere.
We're going through our own crisis. We're treading water ourselves.
Yeah. Sometimes
I've been in that situation where people were going through their crisis, and I was going through my crisis too, and it was all I could do is to keep going, to stay alive.
Get out of bed.
I mean,
it is that
great. But
those
we
times.
beat ourselves up so bad
because
if we lose a family, if somebody, and how do you tell them? Well, you don't understand. I got 4 other crises going over here. I got a staff situation, and I got a family crisis, and I got to preach Sunday.
Right.
And you're not, reachable because the church has gotten too big or this. Big. And it's like, a lot of times it was never really what someone would think. I think, at least in our case, and again, this is maybe I'm having my own little session with you, but really good. In our case, we're better at care than we've ever been. And I was there before. I was there when we had 500 people. I was there at 1,000. I know the balls we dropped back then, and I know the ones we drop now. We still miss it. But the level of that we push ourselves to make sure as the congregation gets larger that we're staying smaller, that we're caring for people in a greater way than ever before is more and more our focus. Right. Not how do we grow in numerically, but how do we make sure that we're caring for what we have as we grow? And so, but you feel guilty because you hear about this family left and you just go back in your mind because you don't always get the answers, so you're like, oh, they went through that sickness and I wonder if we were there right. And I was told that we were there, but.
So what are you guilty of?
I think you feel guilty because, you feel like you've dropped a ball, or did we not do what I thought? Did they feel like I should have?
For some reason, and probably it was me. That's usually how a pastor's mind goes. If he were to be honest, I think most of us take it personal.
Okay, so definitely.
And because they don't say anything, if it's so rare.
Yeah.
They don't
even come and tell you.
Right.
And we're just kind of airing out like
I guess.
I guess. It does hurt you. You have feelings. It hurts your feelings. You can act Teflon all you want.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is for, I don't let it beat me up like it used to, especially when we were many years ago. One thing about older is you really get to a point where you are what you are and you do what you do, and I get it. I don't want anybody who doesn't want to be here. That's a hard place to get to, because it may sound a little calloused, but especially on my staff or anything like that, life is too short to go through doing life with people you don't even like to be around.
Yeah, I've actually heard you say that before.
I don't.
When we weren't being recorded.
I have zero tolerance for that anymore. It's like, and it doesn't mean that they have to like what I like. It just is something about the culture that they have to fit. If everybody feels that way about somebody, that they give off this vibe that they're just not part of the team or something, especially, does that sound too cold? I shouldn't say it like that, but that's what this thing is about. It's the truth. It's the truth, that you need to be honest enough to say, not everybody's going to stay with us forever, and you understand that, I guess.
So
I think
but it
too.
hurts.
Yeah,
it hurts.
You're hitting kind of both parts of guilt. So I know last episode I mentioned the Townsend Leadership Program. We have a whole training on guilt for pastors, for leaders.
Amazing.
Really common. Yeah.
Where can we find that?
Really common. Yeah.
I'm going to watch it today.
There's a link on my website at drmichelefleming.com. So Dr. Michele Fleming, 1 L and Michelle, 1 M and Fleming. And it's designed by Dr. John Townsend. So you can also go to his website at drtownsend.com. And it's called the Townsend Leadership Program.
And go one more time with your deal, and a little
Dr.
slower
Michele
in case
Fleming.
they're just listening.
Sure. Dr. Michele, Michele, and then Fleming with 1 M, Fleming. And you'll see a tab there that says TLP, which stands for Townsend Leadership Program. And there's programs both online and all with directors across the country. And there's a whole training on guilt. And so there's a couple of parts happening there. One of them is this sense of over-responsibility. I am there to rescue. I have to save everyone. I have to be everything to everyone, and realizing kind of the limits of who we are, just the physical, that's what we were talking about before, like the physical limitations of who I am, that I can't meet that need for every person. And we were mentioning before about kind of all work is grief work. Grieving that, I couldn't be at the hospital with that family because I was elsewhere or going through my own crises. You are not responsible for how they responded to that. You are not responsible for how they responded to that.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that was their choice. But to grieve the fact that I couldn't be there, because I've heard it said, we are a treasure of possibilities within an outline of limitations.
Yeah. Well, where's the balance? Because say a family, they have limitations too, and they chose on their days off to serve at the church and do a small group, and they sacrifice in all these ways, and then here you are. This is your job. And it came time for maybe you to sacrifice for them, is the way I feel. And you drop the ball in some way. But the thing is every day I have one guarantee, that at the end of the day, I will have disappointed somebody.
That's right.
Every day I will have not, and many times for someone that was there for me or for the church or for the ministry. And it's just, it's a suffocating feeling, like, will I ever be able to get there?
No.
Yeah.
You will never meet all the needs. I mean, I kind of laughed there. So what you're talking about is reality. There is positive reality that we all know and love, and there's negative reality. So it is facing negative reality. It's still real. I do think at the end of the day, you will probably disappoint someone. And leaning against those, you were very open when you said your codependent, tendencies, leaning against taking responsibility for how they responded and not fragilizing them. That term, like, wow, if I wasn't there, they're going to fall apart. That means everything to them. That's seeing them as fragile. And there are times in people's lives where they are fragile, but most people, walking around today can handle a disappointment. And maybe you're even teaching them to grow, to say, hey, accepting the imperfections in myself and accepting the imperfections in other people, that's how we mature spiritually.
You're right.
And emotionally. Yeah. And so, like we said, kind of grieving that, where in my life was I taught that I need to keep everyone happy? Because we were talking earlier about the burnout. I mean, that's just a formula for burnout.
It's good.
Yeah. You don't want to sacrifice yourself or your family constantly for everyone else.
I would add this. It's a long-term game that you need to play, meaning I don't feel that guilt as much at this stage because the church has learned as we have grown that they know it's got to be something really, really, really serious if I'm calling them or and I hate to say it like that. Now, every once in a while, it's just I just think of people and call them, but in general, they know, they get that. But you have to train them. Don't blame them. Train the church to know, and that my church is so amazing in that area. They are so amazing. They are shocked when I call them, or they're shocked when I show up, at the hospital. They're shocked and so appreciative, and it's always the same line. I can't believe you called. I can't believe you came. And and for everyone that I have done and get to do, I've missed probably 500, that I didn't get to do. And yet the people, I think if you train them, does that make sense?
Oh,
There's a culture in our church that people know I'm a human being, and that they are very appreciative. And it's the little things too, though. Like you can if you just write a little note or handwritten, and it's not a gimmick. It's from your heart, or a quick phone call, just a quick. And I'd say to all the young pastors out there, you never outgrow that stuff. Especially, do you treat everybody the same? If I'm to be honest, no. I love them all the same, but there are people who've been with me from day one. There are people who are in leadership roles in the church that have helped me build this church, and they are high. There are people who cannot. They're not big givers. They're not anything like that. They're not. But they are precious people that my family has come up with. And they matter. I know them. I know them. I don't. They have. You understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly.
And that kind of stuff is so important, that you follow your own heart and conscience about, like, if there is somebody that's been around here for 20 or 30 years or long, or even not even that long, 10 years, and I know them and I hear something about them, my heart is to pick up that phone. It'll take me 2, 3. I control even how long, because you can always go to, I'm going to pray for you at the end, and do it from your heart. But it's showing people how much you care about them. And little things like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think about that.
You never outgrow that. You never outgrow that kind of stuff, but you do outgrow feeling like the guilt and stuff of not being there for everything, because it's just impossible.
So I think there's a really good delineation in the Bible between guilt and godly sorrow. This is a concept from Bruce Naramore that taught at Biola. I think it's 2 Corinthians chapter 7. So the feeling of guilt isn't as strong in the Bible as it talks about godly sorrow. So guilt, the focus a lot of times is on myself. It's about the past. And this critical judge shows up in my head telling me how I deserve punishment, right? So that's guilt. Godly sorrow is more about the impact on the other person, or the impact on the relationship, or even, my impact with Christ. And it's about the future. And when the judge shows up, it's a warm, kind judge in your head, more of our loving God that shows us both mercy, not giving us the punishment we deserve, and grace. And the outcome then can be repentance if needed, and change. And so the change might be kind of re-educating what change needs to happen? Re-educating the congregation that I can't be available to all people, or I need to change my approach that makes people believe I'm there. But the shift is more away from myself and into that place of like attachment and moving forward. And I think Paul talks about that.
I love the story you told in the last podcast about the pastor that you went to his church and he had a letter from his 6-year-old or something, and I'll let you tell it. But to me, that was one of the most brilliant things, because it said to that whole congregation, and I'll let you tell it, but again, because it's probably a whole nother audience, but something like that lets people know, even discussing this, working it into a sermon and saying, sometimes I feel so guilty. I feel so guilty that I wasn't there for some of you in your darkest hours when you needed me. And you can turn it into a major point in a message of being vulnerable to kind of bring that stuff out. And it actually becomes very emotional and effective in teaching a Bible principle that even though I can't be there, we're pointing you to somebody who can be there.
Yeah.
And the body of Christ can be there, that your small group can be there.
Right.
I think in saying that, people get it then when you do it in that context, right?
Absolutely.
And I know you know this, but it's a good practical. Tell that story one more time.
So we had just moved to Southern California. We were looking to attend a church and kind of walked in to a new church, and the pastor was given a sermon and showed on the screen the actual letter that his 6 or 7-year-old daughter had written that said, "Daddy, we miss you. You are never around. And wherever it is you're going, I hope you're happy," kind of in a kid's way, in a kind, gentle way, not totally understanding what he was doing. And he used that as his platform to announce that they were canceling Saturday night services because he just couldn't be there and do it all. And he needed to protect that one day to be with his family. And as you said, my response, I think a lot of people in the congregation was, this is the church I'm going to. That's the man I want to follow. That is open to the gentle heart of his daughter, that will be vulnerable enough. The research shows that vulnerability builds trust, and people follow a pastor they trust, right? Because if you're bulletproof and you're perfect, I actually can't relate to you. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about some people may want to worship you, but that's not what you're going for. I want to trust and respect you, and that does come with being open and vulnerable.
Anything else on that, Marcus? That's really, really powerful.
I was, I was thinking about what you were saying about the, is it right to lean towards the people that have been there? And, I always think about that scripture of, Jesus asking, where are the 9? He healed the 10 lepers. Mm-hmm. And then the one returned, and he asked the question, where is the 9? So that's what we are always asking. Where are all those people that we ministered to, that we were there? I actually heard the story. Brian Houston said this years and years ago, that he was asked, I think by Phil Pringle, that's his name, the pastor, another pastor there in Australia, to come speak on a Sunday. It was kind of last minute, and he went to his church, and he knew more people by their first name basis at his church than he knew at his own. And I think about that. I think all the people that you seem to get to know the most over the years, they're not there. And you know their name, you know their story, and then you're looking at people that you don't know, and kind of how it feels sometimes.
Yeah. He's really expressing a deep thing to pastors of how, and their wives, the emotional feeling of abandonment, I guess, in some ways, that you do take it personal. Absolutely. And you feel it, and you think, these are my friends, these are my people. They'll give me the benefit of the doubt, and sometimes they don't. And this isn't putting our precious people down. We love our churches, but we are human in that way. And I think he's really touching on a nerve of, especially when you're trying to build a ministry, and every person counts, and every seat you want it filled, and that's the goal, kind of,
And I'm hearing part of it is not getting the feedback. Is it possible to reach out and say, hey, I'm not pressuring you to come back, but I'm just wondering what happened or what made you feel like you couldn't fit here?
That's a really good question. I'll tell you my experience.
You're going to get depressed.
Maybe you can say, but I want to finish that story. Jesus said, "Where is the 9?"
Yeah.
He did ask, and it is a normal thing to wonder where all the people that have left, But he quickly just focused on the one that returned or stayed or was grateful or thankful, that did realize that there were changes that happened in their life. And I think it's appropriate that because then it says that person was made whole. There is something about focusing on the people that have stayed, that are grateful, instead of focusing on all the people that you failed in some way or missed it in some way, whether it was in their interpretation or whatever. But
it's very helpful to people listening right now.
Yeah.
We're discussing it because this is stuff that preachers know, but they don't talk about it because they don't want anybody to know that I lost some people.
Yeah, no, we have you here, so maybe you can help with this. But I'm curious with him. So in all my years of pastoring, anytime, because a lot of times, people they drift. It's kind of a slow thing. I don't know if maybe they're thinking, I wonder if they'll notice when I'm gone this long. I don't know if they're maybe hitting another church one week and then coming back to you. I don't know how they're doing it. I imagine there's probably a myriad of ways they do it. But usually when they're gone, when you find out they're gone, they're gone. And you've already missed it because you didn't know or sense or pick up on it or whatever. And it's too, and so in all the years that I've done this, there's only one couple that I ever chased that came back and it was positive. Not one time did I ever call or check in or go find, try to explain, hear what they had to say. So you kind of get to that point where if they're lost meaning their heart's broken, they're going through a failure in life, a sickness, an addiction, a marital, that's one thing. But just people that just, I've never been able to go after them and do anything that would amend it in a way like a Matthew 18.
So my approach on that is if I hear about a family that is left, even if they didn't notify me, and I hear about it and they were really here and they really made a contribution. I can't say I've done this every time, but if I hear about it or I hear they're considering leaving or they're going somewhere else, I will call them and and usually they will tell me then, and I always, from my heart, I will release them. I'll say, I appreciate what you've done for the church. I'll never forget your labor of love here, and I want you to know the door is always open, and if I can say it with a genuine heart, and they, because good people, it's just change sometimes, and so I'll say the door is always open. I make sure I always say that, and you can always come here and be celebrated and loved because you genuinely were there with me through the thick and thin, and I appreciate it. That's a big deal because many times people circle back around. You give it a few years, it's amazing. It's amazing because they find out that Free Chapel had some issues, and it's always things that they go somewhere else and find out, well, this isn't that unique. That this church has some issues too.
Very good.
Without that feedback, it would be hard to know what to do or what's happening. You guys are probably aware of the research that in general churches are losing people. The culture is getting people and getting this self-reliant, I can do everything myself. Why do I need a Lord? Why do I need to submit?
Online.
Yeah, church online, exactly. So, just getting that feedback as much as possible, either from them or from people around you in the staff. It's another important piece we talk about in leadership development. If you're not getting feedback, that's not good. No feedback is a bad thing. And when I mean feedback, I mean like this is something that wasn't done perfectly. Everyone can have the rah, but how do you integrate what we talked about, the negative reality?
So
and when you model that, like I am open to hearing that, it again changes the culture and
like I have a tendency sometimes to get on very controversial issues.
No,
and even political things, but they're really not political to me. They're biblical issues that the culture has turned into political, but I will stand on that. And we lose people because of that a lot. I mean, during the pandemic, I lost hundreds. I mean, because of my strong stand for life and things like that. You know, I just won't budge on some things. And it really, in my mind, is not political. I go with whatever party or candidate is closest to what the Scripture says. But it has created havoc over and over and over in the church for years. And I'm not immune to that, man. Because I work, but I do listen. Like when I'll meet with the pastors, and some of the churches are in different locations, of course, and so there's a different demographic of people in those particular locations. Even the very culture of those locations would be maybe more liberal or more whatever, because it's in that particular demographic. So I don't want to tick people off. I don't want to, I want to, it makes me fine tune and always filter what I say with balance, I hope. But I also, what she's saying is so true to pastors that are listening is to get feedback, just to be brave enough to listen to real feedback. Like I think about Dr. Rich on my staff, Dr. Rich, he would tell me brutal things at times about what I said and how that interpreted into this and this and this, and I may agree with half of it or a third of it or none of it, but it always puts a pull back on the reins just a little bit to check myself and my motive and make sure I'm not stepping out into something that I don't need to. It's not a battle that's worth fighting. It's not a hill to die on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that feedback really helps me.
It's part of the truth, right? It's part of
and we're not immune in that situation to missing and letting our own raw feelings come through in such a tough time culturally. It's and even spiritually. To not, we've all seen it happen, and we have to walk a tight line right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you said, I stand on the truth. That's what I love to hear when you speak about these topics that have become controversial, but I'm open to understanding maybe I can soften this, or this came across this way that was off-putting, because that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to convert hearts and minds.
Let me give you a great example of I really feel like what we're talking about is going to help people.
I keep kicking up.
So we got the war going on in Israel right now that is so tragic. And of course, the terrorists started it, Hamas, and attacked. And I think that's why I get in trouble. I name and say stuff, but it is what it is. But here's the thing, like I have a pastor on staff who is married to a Palestinian beautiful girl and mother of his children. And so I'm pro-Israel. I'm pro-Israel biblically. I know what the Scripture teaches. I'm pro-Israel because, God's gave the land to the people, and we can go on and all of that. And that's another whole podcast that we should probably do. But that does not mean that I do not love the Palestinian people, and what this helped me do is understand this pastor's wife has Christian family in Gaza. There's only about 1,000 Christians. They're probably better Christians than I am and you are, because they live it, and it could cost them their life. It causes them to be abandoned by their own families and culture in every way. And if I'm not careful, I can be so strong on one side that I have no feeling or even compassion for the other side of even, and let's go further, the Muslims. I love the Muslims. I have friends there. I've gone to Israel and taken trips and gone into Bethlehem and done, we know these people. We've done business with these people for 20, 30 years. And they're precious, precious people. They're peaceful. There are many peaceful. And I don't know if I'm making sense, but that is so important, that kind of feedback. And I love that this pastor had the courage to call me and say, would you talk with me and my wife? Would you and Sharice sit down and talk? Because I came out very strong out of the gate, as I always do, on something like that. But to get the counterbalance and even ask myself, we give millions and millions of dollars to Israel. We're building a hospital and this and that over there. But have I done anything for Palestinian people? Have I done anything of that magnitude? No. Why am I not doing that? It really pricked my heart in conviction and said, well, do you not care about those babies and those children and those people that are hungry and those people that have needs? And you can always make an excuse as to why, but it really opened my heart. I don't know what's coming in the future, but I will be very sensitive to that, from now on. And I've got a feeling we'll do something there.
Yeah, I hear you talking about not casting a label over a whole group of people, which, we do, the culture does constantly. There's a lot on social media that wants us to all be against each other. We call that in psychology othering, like they're other than me. They're different. Well, no, those are families trying to raise their children and educate them, put food in their mouth and trying to stay safe. And like you said, under more persecution than we are, and in some way felt so oppressed, that they have to take this action. So yeah, absolutely. Just kind of getting that piece of realizing, like, I don't want to cast that net so large and just turn people into less than human, unless denying the inherent dignity that they've been given.
Yeah, I think the terrorists are if they don't repent, they get what they've got coming. If you can hurt children and babies, but that's the point. It's terrorists. It's Hamas. And Hamas is not all the Palestinian people. The many, many, many of the Palestinian people would love to have peace if they could have it, probably.
Yeah. So we digress just a bit there.
Sorry.
I think. Well, we also want we just to help pastors understand, it's okay to say no. It's okay to not be everything to everybody. You can try, do your best, but at the end of the day.
And like you said, be vulnerable and open to feedback.
I really like that letter to even have pastors, hey, you should probably figure out how to integrate this into stuff consistently. To say, hey, I'm so sorry I can't be more than what I am, but
this is the reality we live in, And we're talking to the impact on the family. And that was another piece that's so important for the PKs out there, right? Yeah. The kids, that protecting that time and protecting them from all of those pressures that you have under a pastor. I was working with a pastor who went through a church split. And as you were saying earlier, the folks that left were also his wife's friends and his kids' friends. And the kids were asking, can we hang out with them again? Or what happened? Wow. Or the families used to be friends. And it's a grief process. And as we were saying earlier, the godly sorrow part is, okay, what's on the other side of that? What change? Where did I contribute? Where am I not responsible? Kind of going through that process and shepherding the kids as much as possible. It's not easy.
How do we protect our kids? You're going into something so important. So how do we protect our kids in general?
Yeah. And protect them from what would be the question then?
From being hurt. I think it's a great topic in general concerning social media, concerning how do you raise kids today? What are in this culture, in this time, and especially if you're in ministry, that there's the added pressure of that on top of everything else. So, can you give us some guidelines of saying no, of how to handle social media, how much is too much, or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And because of the forward-facing of the pastor, the social media is even more, can be damaging to the kids because you're a public figure. I know you both have probably lived through that. And to recognize that we are going through kind of the same thing that the Industrial Revolution did to culture. We're going through this digital revolution. So we are now raising kids that have these devices that we never had. So number one, I would say educate yourself on the impact of what these devices are doing to children. We're learning it's not just what's on the screen, it's the screen itself. It's the pixels and the changing of the pixels, and it goes in through the eyeballs and what it does to their little brains. And it is contributing to a difficulty in terms of concentration, in terms of focus. So limit screen time. There's national standards for screen time that I think are too much, but at least start with those national standards and be sure to limit the content of what they see. It shocks me when people hand their kids this device that is free access to the internet and social media. There's a big push now, no iPhones until 8th grade. Wait till 8th. What we've done with my kids, I have 12-year-olds, is we basically gave them a flip phone. The only thing it does is call and text, and they can't put any contacts on it. But it looks like a regular phone because they want to, look cool. It will take videos and pictures. You can't send them anywhere. So it's just on their phone, and they can't get any pictures or videos through text, but they still feel, like they're a part of the club, which is important at that age. Yeah.
Where are those phones?
It's called a GAB phone, G-A-B-B, is what I use. And there's some things out there called a dumb phone, right? So I have smartphone, it's a dumb phone. So wait till 8 to put a phone in their hand, and then waiting till 16 on social media.
Wow.
16 before they have their own accounts. Is
that possible?
It is. It is. I think if you are strong enough to be the one that says, all families are different, this is how we are going to do it. If you want to set up an account on your phone that you and your child can look at together, but you just don't hand it to them. So you can check whatever snarky comment somebody made and make sure, that your child is protected from that, or you can talk through it. There's disturbing images. There's free access to pornography. There's all sorts of horrible things. I think it's irresponsible parenting just to hand this device over. And the social media is pushing those images towards the kids on social media. So for sure, wait to 8th, 16 on social media, backing all the way up. A child under 2 should never be in front of any screen, particularly because of the brain development, even if it's Mozart for infants, because of the impact of the screen itself on their brain development and the proliferation of some forms of difficulty attention and concentrating. Certainly not all the ADHD, that's a real diagnosis, but the impact on that. That what happens, we've probably seen this, is you're so used to the immediate distraction that your brain gets in this hyper-aroused mode. And so a teacher standing there talking is incredibly boring. You're not going to be able to concentrate in school when you're used to this immediate, gratification. Kind of hitting the like button goes right into the soul of our little kids. They want to be liked. They want to belong. They want to know that's important. So protecting them from that. And being the pioneer family that says, no, that's, I always like to follow it up that me and my house are going to follow the Lord. I remind the kids of that. And this is the way we're following the Lord. I am protecting your innocence, your purity. I know it's going to come. I know you're going to get exposed to that. It doesn't need to happen to your brain at 12 or 11 or 10. And so those are just some basic guidelines.
That's so good.
When kids come into our house, because they all come in, a lot of them, and have the phones, I take them away sometimes. Like, okay, you're playing outside. Like you don't need the phone. It's also this proliferation of the selfie culture, which is basically, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me doing this, look at me doing that. And that becomes like, that's not sound theological. We're not all about ourselves, or certainly not what we look like. We're here to kind of serve others and get out of myself. And the culture pushes against that really strongly. And finding other families to do it together. So you're not the Lone Ranger, finding the other families in your church, in your schools that want to raise their kids the same way.
I think it's powerful coming from you as and your medical background, but also your as a mother and as a believer, you you're saying, you're giving permission to parents out there to be different, to make a difference in culture and in our kids' and families' lives. What about what other areas do you see just so detrimental to kids now that are kind of unique to the times that we're living in? Is you mentioned how many hours a day? Is there a particular target that you would recommend?
I can tell you what we do in our house is 30 minutes a day.
Wow.
I do think the American Pediatric Society says 12. Yeah, says up to an hour a day at this age, and that's all screens. And there's a timer because I am too busy to actually monitor that. So you set it up that their device turns off at that time. And if there's a special day or, they need they can earn extra time.
I think I need that.
Oh, yeah. Another thing
I can tell even in my own mind where if I'm watching my phone too much, I can't even watch a movie. I'll get 5 minutes into the movie and be like, oh, this is taking too long.
Well, they've built them to be addictive.
Yeah.
They built them to,
I can tell.
They are buying your attention. That is what is being commoditized, monetized is your attention on the screen and how long you look at something. It just feels like the
I like
essence
that
of
thing you said a while back about the only other time someone spends that much time on the other side of glass. Like, because they
visiting a prisoner,
is somebody that's in prison.
Because somebody said, I think it's if you were a teenager now, by the time you do your lifetime, you will have spent 7 full years of your life behind glass.
Oh my gosh!
7 full years. So it's like you're doing a prison sentence of 7 years, and all they do is touch like this. They don't really. Reach out and touch, and they're having trouble communicating, and
absolutely.
Loneliness is a plague.
An absolute plague, and the isolation.
I mean, among teenagers too, right?
Yes.
If you've got a teenager and they're not social, meaning physically out running, got friends and having sports and all those kinds of things, and they're in this little locked-in world. What are steps that can be taken that don't cause World War III in your family if you've waited too late to deal with that?
Yeah, so a little bit of World War III might not be bad if it's in the service of you believing you're doing what's right for your child.
Wow.
Certainly, get some input. You don't want to be doing anything out of your own anger or punitive nature towards your child. But I would encourage parents to step into their authority as the parent. Your greatest influencer with your children is your relationship. So if you're having problems kind of directing and influencing your children where you'd like them to be, look at what's going on in the relationship. If they're spending that much time in front of the screen, where they need to learn to relate first is with you. Maybe it's we put down the phones at 7:00, mom and dad included, and we have dinner and we actually talk and make eye contact and learn how to relate to each other, because that's kind of where you first learn it. We learn to, there's another piece there certainly of like accepting that your kids are different. Well, why? I did actually work with a pastor who would ask his teenage kids, what do you believe that you don't think I believe anymore? Like, how have your beliefs changed? How have your beliefs changed? And you think I can't hear it. So I want you to tell me and the conversation wasn't to change their beliefs. The conversation in that moment was just, I need to know who you are. I need to be interested in who you are as a person. That is the strongest foundation you can give to your children as a protection against basically them becoming objects in social media about what you look like or what you have or this prestige that we know leads to desolation and ultimate, distress and anguish. So yeah, I would step up, be okay making the rules. Hey, God made rules. His rules are to love us, for us to, out of love, to kind of show us the path, and to kind of bond with other families willing to do the same. Actually, I'll say too, I see it on the other side. I was just having this conversation with a neighbor where her daughter is an amazing soccer player. And so the club she's looking at is inviting her up to the next level of play, which would mean on airplanes on weekends.
Here we go.
And they would miss church and Sunday school. And so what I said to her is, she doesn't want her child to miss out on this opportunity. Well, here's the negative reality. There's a loss on either side. Either your child will not be the best soccer player she could ever be, or you're going to lose practicing your faith and her being involved in youth group. I mean, it's one or the other. So which one are you going to choose?
So good.
And she said, do you think I should tell them, here are my stipulations. I have questions. Don't see what the club's doing is they're approaching the kid. Hey, don't you want to do this? Because they know the kid's going to pressure the mom. We're talking about an 11-year-old.
Right.
Yeah. And I said, no, you step in there and you say, you do not approach my child with this opportunity. I have lots of questions. I can't travel on Sundays. I mean, there's a way to make it work, but here's where it's at, people, is what is your priority? And if that faith life and your faith community, I personally think games on Sunday are insane. We only do them when we can go to church. I'd like to keep a Sabbath. It's kind of hard to do when you have a game to go to. But so it's really stepping in and kind of claiming this is our space, our faith space, because the culture will get your kids. You can talk all day long. I'm telling you, it's got to be more than talk. They got to see you as a parent, put a boundary around our family time and our faith life.
Good.
Yeah, we put it on our calendar, family time. That means we don't do date night. The kids don't have friends over. There's 6 other nights a week that we can do that. We are just gonna, and maybe we watch a faith-filled movie or we play a game, but they have to be shown, how do I put the phone down, put the outside world down? Because in the end, that's all we give to each other. That's all we got is this relationship between us. You got me on my soapbox a little bit there.
No, I like it.
I love the practical things you're giving too. About even the tough calls, I think, are so important. And with preachers' kids, are there any tips? I know you've researched. I know you've mentioned the Townsend Institute has a whole talks and I think programs to help parents, pastors, as parents.
Yeah.
Are there any? What are the top little practical tips that you could give in raising children in a pastor's home? Are there any things that just jump out that are kind of universal?
Yeah.
That everybody is going to have to deal with if they're in that world?
Sure. So there is a protective feature when the kids are let's say elementary age, because they're not that aware of other people's perceptions, just developmentally. Right. So it's a little easier to protect them from some of the impact of being a pastor's kid. It's right as they go into adolescence. They call this developmentally the imaginary audience. Whether you're a pastor's kids or not, you think everyone's looking at you, if you can remember what it was like to be in middle school, right? So around that 10, 11, or 12, I would be extremely careful of any conversations about, well, what is that going to look like? What are people going to think? What are they going to say? Because they are already struggling with that in their own mind. And if you and your wife need to have those conversations, then they're elsewhere apart from the kids. Really enforcing the belief that this is who we are as a family. Other people might react differently, or other people might think this. You can always come to me. You can always come to me, and we can talk about, what someone said here or what someone did this. So try to turn the spotlight off of that imaginary audience. And then I would say, as teenagers, don't afraid to be the parent. I have seen, I believe, we get this message to abdicate parenting. Well, they want to be independent. They want to be on their own. Yes, of course they do. But I know whose house they're going to, who they're talking to, what they're going to be watching, what is happening there. I'm going to call the parents and find out. And so you certainly cannot control 100% what your kids are exposed to. We're talking teenagers, or who they're exposed to. But you can have them environments that you have knowledge of what type of environment it is, and then relying on that relationship, that when they do come against that information or that behavior that is not how you want to live raise your family, that they come talk to you. And then finally, launching to college. In terms of spiritual and religious development, it is very common to go through this phase where you have to reject and kind of break away from what mom and dad taught me. It used to be college. It might even be happening sooner now. So in that phase, whereas your kids are actually stepping away from the faith, I would say remaining attached and calm and non-judgmental and standing in the truth of your faith is the best you can do. It's it's the best you can do, and it's an important thing to do, that they feel like that you're not rejecting them. They're going to reject you. They're going to turn away potentially. That's an arc of development they see. And a lot of kids can get lost there because they don't feel free to kind of come back in, or they don't feel free to ask questions. Oh my gosh, let your kids say, not sure God's real. Oh, that's awesome. Why not? What do you not think is real about God? Well, have you looked for the questions? Why not, or the answers to those questions? Just don't stop asking the questions. That's when you lose them. And it's so old dated. Why do you think marriage is between a man and a wife, a man and a woman? Well, what do you think marriage is? So why do you think that? And where do you get that from? It's not at this older teenage college. You're not preaching at them. You're more wanting to hear where they're coming from, so you can offer, this is how you can explore and find out why we stand on this foundational truth. It needs to become their own. They have found this stage of abdicating faith, where if I just believe it because my parents believe, eventually it will fall apart. Either it's at 30 or 40 or 50. At some point, there's a faith crisis because they never owned it for themselves. So letting your kids kind of go through that process to own it for themselves. And then tolerating our own loss as they do break away and make different choices and become different people, that we can just handle, everything they do is not a direct reflection on me. I don't have an imaginary audience out there either. It's okay, that my child knows they're loved, and that's going to get them through just about everything.
Tremendous.
So good.
Well,
so good.
Anything else?
What about culture, school systems, all that kind of stuff?
Gosh.
Is that just too big of a?
Oh no, it's important. It's part of it. If you add up the hours, your kids are at school more than they're with you in terms of waking hours, right? So ongoing conversation about what's happening at school, making things, I don't want to say normal, but normalizing so they can talk about it. So, for instance, so-and-so has a crush on so-and-so. Well, if it's a boy with a girl, well, that's normal. Yeah, you're designed to have crushes. And you talk about, what does that mean? What do you do with a crush at this age? And when should we date? Well, what's dating for? When are you ready to get married? What do you
When should they date? What is there a magic number that you think?
Well, it's defining date. So that means someone picking my kid up, putting them in a car and taking them off on their own, they know that's a pretty big step. We're looking somewhere around 16 or 17 before that one-on-one would be allowed. And we would have to know who the person that the young man is. He would have had to been in our house and at our dinner table definitely more than once. We would need to know his parents. We don't have to be friends, but I got to know who the parents are, know their faith background. I can't make my kid choose the same faith, but
so
what does faith
that's not
mean?
old fashioned. That's not you even through statistics or whatever that's still important. I mean, that's interesting to me, because I didn't even know if people still think like that, if parents still
in
think
some
like
circles, what I just said was pretty liberal. There are some circles who believe that you shouldn't date till you get married. And that's why I like the conversation of, what is this dating for? Are you ready to get married? No? Okay, well, let's talk about, you just enjoy this person's time? Then you shouldn't be doing things that move you towards a marriage state. And then delineating courtship, different from dating. Courtship is, now I think I might want to marry you or be only with you. Have you talked about this with the person that you're going out with?
So when that 16-year-old starts dating, what kind of restrictions do you recommend, or what kind of boundaries do you recommend?
Sure. Well, when you said that, first thing comes to mind is lots of prayer.
Well, you got that right.
Yeah. It's same for whether you have a son or a daughter. I mean, if your son is going into someone's home and putting their daughter into his car, you need to know who that family is. You certainly need to know where they're going. The phone that we just, demonized, it does track them. And it shows the Life 360 and other apps. You can see where they're going and who they're going to be with. I mean, a curfew is just, hey, is that old school? I mean, just a curfew is just flat out, standard. I know kids have ways to get around this. There is actually research that shows even the Christian kids lie to their parents. There's a little bit that's developmentally normal. If you catch them in a minor lie, don't let the ceiling fall in the house. You talk through why, you talk through the remorse. I'm not suggesting being over punitive. You have to balance some of that freedom. But yeah, it would certainly be, and if you're going somewhere, this party you're going to, they're probably drinking, so you just ask. So is there drinking there? How are you going to handle drinking? obviously when the car is involved in drinking, extremely strict rules, along with, okay, if you end up drinking and you didn't mean to, here's Uber, either call me or here's the card and you use it automatically for the Uber, or I'll call you an Uber. I have a rule right now with my daughters. Wherever you go with a friend, you come home with that friend. I mean, you don't go to these parties, whether you're with your buddies or girls going together, and all of a sudden someone decides they're staying when you all came together. Oh, no. You drive them home. They want to get back in the car and go back over that party or Uber. You can't control what they do, but protective factor, good. Yeah, you stay together. That's how we show we love each other. That's how we show. Like we were talking earlier,
really good.
If I'm a Christian, I'm supposed to be different. People are supposed to notice I'm different, more than an emblem that I wear. And that is, no, we came together, we're going home together. So yes, I wish there was a better word than old fashioned, but my husband has an interesting story. He was actually raised realizing that his parents were more strict. He was the oldest, and he's just like, I knew we all had to be home before anybody else. And he said, they made me realize that they probably cared more. Like they cared more about me. And his neighborhood, some kids got on drugs, some kids never got out of high school. And so it's okay for your kid not to like you. I mean, I have heard if your kid likes you, then you're not being all the time, then you're not being a parent. Kid needs to know you love them. Kid needs to know you like them. They like I want to spend time with you and be around you. I'm not so distracted that I'm not going to hang out with you. But it's okay for them to be mad at you because you are setting a boundary while they're under your roof.
And it's so, like you said, building the relationship stronger gives you more ability to enforce.
Absolutely.
With them, a rule or whatever.
And
I like
influence.
that's very true.
Which goes back to protecting that family time. You're not going to build a relationship with a 5-minute check-in.
Powerful.
I felt that the foundation of everything you were saying, somebody might just hear, oh, I like that rule. I like that rule.
Yeah.
I'm going to enforce that rule. But really everything you said was relationship,
Yeah.
care, love. They matter. Being interested, being curious.
Absolutely.
Not jumping to harsh judgments.
Yep.
And because you've got that, you can say, well, this is how we're going to do it. Yeah. And this is the way we do things. I think that's, and like he said, you're not a fuddy-duddy. You're educated, you're insightful, the science, the psychology, the sociology, all these factors are going into an educated approach.
Yeah.
On raising children. Very, very good.
Part of that relationship is knowing what they're interested in. So that family time, they get to pick sometimes. I mean, I definitely find myself doing things I don't love, but that's what my kid wants to do. We said, this is what relationship means. So sometimes we do what you want. Sometimes we drag you along. You're coming whether you want to or not.
A lot of the things as we close that you've talked about deep down in our hearts, like the sports on Sunday and all of that, and how it can just get so out of hand, traveling teams, and we're not against any of those things. Sports are wonderful, but you really do have to make up your mind that there are priorities in your home and in your family that you're willing to defend and stand, right?
Absolutely.
And hearing you say that, I think, is a great encouragement to parents out there that are doing that. And they feel, as we talked today about guilt, they feel guilt like I'm taking my kid, they just want to be, especially a pastor's home, they just want to be normal.
Yeah.
Well, normal is not. Look at normal now.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be normal?
No. Because
it's normal for kids to be doing everything, doing drugs, getting high, getting drunk, whatever else that they can find. So at early ages, so we don't want our kids to be normal.
No. We want them to be Christians.
That's it.
We haven't been normal since the beginning.
Well, Dr. Fleming, thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, you have so many materials that, and you're very connected to Dr. Townsend and others that you work with that could be very beneficial to people who are listening to this, who have ministries, who want material? And you mentioned you had an ebook.
I do. Yeah, I have a free ebook that listing out all the resources we've discussed on this episode and the previous one. And you can go to my website that we mentioned, I think.
Give it again.
Yeah, Dr. Michele Fleming. It's Dr. Michele, Michele, and then Fleming with one M, FLEMING.com.
Well, we feel a little bit guilty for taking so much time. I bet you
problem.
are exhausted. All we've done is thrown questions at you.
This is so important.
Thank
And
you.
for folks to know they're not alone, for pastors to know they're not alone in this.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you for hanging out with us once again. Please like or subscribe. Let somebody know if this podcast has blessed you or helped you in any way. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for Mentoring Moments with Jentezen Franklin and Marcus Mecum. Leave a comment to join the conversation. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.